Call to order the Board of Education meeting for January 13th, 2025. I'll be acting as President Pro Tem until we hold our nomination and election process. Mrs. Lee, please call the roll.
Mr. Bagley.
Here.
Mrs. Bernie Miller.
Present.
Mr. Clark.
Present.
Mrs. Gundram.
Here.
Mr. Napier.
Here.
Mrs. Gundram, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes.
I thought we did that already.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Gundram. Next on the agenda is election of the President of the Fairfield Board of Education for 2025. I'll call for nominations.
Nominate Brian Begley.
I second.
We have any other nominations? Then a motion to close the nominations.
So moved.
Second.
A first and a second for that. Mrs. Bernie Miller and Mr. Clark. So then, with no other nominations and a first and a second, I will stand as president for 2025. We will do the oath of office now.
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Lee?
All right, do we stand?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as Board President of the Board of Education of the Fairfield City School District, Butler County, Ohio, to the best of your ability, and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereinafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified?
I do. Great.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bagley.
And next up is the election of the Vice President for the Board of Education. I will ask for nominations.
Nominate Scott Clark.
Second.
Any other nominations? I'm going to motion to close the nominations.
Make a motion.
Second.
Mr. Clark and Mrs. Birding Miller, thank you. Again, with no further,
That was
Mr.
me.
Napier.
Mr. Clark?
No, I'm Napier now.
I'm Clark.
Oh, you're Clark, sorry. That's right. But this is about Mr. Clark.
Brian, turn your nameplate around now.
I'm getting back in the swing of things here. Thank you, Mr. Napier and Mrs. Birding Miller. Again, with no further nominees and a first and a second, that will close the process. Mr. Clark will be Vice President of the Board of Education for 2025. Mrs. Lee?
Call the roll first.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. We should call the roll. Make it
Mrs. Bernie Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Gundram.
Yes.
Mr. Napier.
Yes.
Mr. Bagley.
Yes. Anxious to make you Vice President.
Brian, you guys need to turn your name tags around
That's
now.
right.
Your nameplates.
Mrs. Lee, will you do the oath of office for Mr. Clark?
Absolutely. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as Board Vice President of the Board of Education of the Fairfield City School District, Butler County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereinafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified?
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And, Mr. President, just as a point of order, I think we skipped the roll call on your motion also, so it might be good just to have the treasurer call the roll.
I think we did, didn't we?
Correct.
All right, Mrs. Lee, if we could go back.
I think you just need a roll call.
Yes, to the motion that Mrs. Birding Miller made, and who was it, the second?
Mr. Clark?
Mr. Clark, yes. And call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Gundram?
Yes.
Mr. Napier?
Yes.
Mr. Bagley?
Yes.
Mrs. Birding Miller?
Yes.
All right,
We are official.
official.
Now you can turn your name in.
Mr. Bagley and members of the board, we do have several items for your consideration under new business and board recommendations. Letter A, establish 2025 meeting dates, times, and location. Suggestion, work sessions, Thursday, February 6th, Thursday, March 6th, Thursday, May 1st at South Elementary, Thursday, June 5th, Thursday, August 7th, Thursday, September 4th, Thursday, November 6th. Time, 6:30 PM. Location, Fairfield Senior High School, Catherine D. Milligan Community Room, 8800 Holden Boulevard. There will be no work session in April, July, October, and December. Regular sessions, Thursday, February 20th at Freshman School, Thursday, March 20th at East Elementary, Thursday, April 10th, Thursday, May 15th, Thursday, June 26th, Thursday, July 10th, Thursday, August 21st, Thursday, September 18th, Thursday, October 16th, Thursday, November 20th, Thursday, December 11th, time 6:30 PM, location Fairfield Senior High School, Catherine D. Milligan Community Room, 8800 Holden Boulevard. Letter B, consider establishment of a board service fund for 2025 in the amount of $9,942. Letter C, recommend approval of the following standing authorizations for 2025. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Lee.
To authorize the treasurer to secure advances from the auditor when funds are available and payable to the district. Authorize the treasurer to borrow short-term funds as needed for cash flow purposes. Authorize the treasurer to invest inactive funds whenever funds are available. Authorize the treasurer to modify appropriations and advance money from fund to fund as needed. Modifications must then be presented to the board for approval. Authorize the treasurer to pay all bills within the limits of the appropriation resolution as bills are received and when the merchandise has been received and in good condition. Authorize the treasurer to utilize the legal firm of Dinsmore and Scholl when fiscal legal opinion is required. Authorize the treasurer to dispose of assets of property not exceeding $10,000 in value that are no longer needed. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Smith.
Authorize superintendent or designee to act as purchasing agent for the district to make purchases of supplies and/or services within the limits of the appropriation measure. Number 9, authorize the superintendent or designee during periods when this board is not in session to make offers of employment directly to candidates for either teaching or non-teaching positions on behalf of this board, and to acknowledge acceptance of such offers on behalf of this board, subject to a subsequent vote of ratification by this board, provided, however, that upon ratification by this board, the employment shall be deemed effective as of the date and time of the employee's acceptance of the superintendent's offer. Nothing in this resolution shall require the Board of Education to employ or continue to employ an individual who has not provided a criminal records check satisfactory to the board or who has not satisfied any other prerequisite to employment created by law or board policy. Number 10, authorize the superintendent or designee on behalf of this board to accept resignations which have been submitted by employees during times when this board is not in session, subject to ratification by this board, provided, however, that upon ratification by this board, such resignation shall be deemed effective as of the date and time of the superintendent's designee's acceptance. Number 11, authorize the superintendent or designee to make offers of employment directly to candidates for substitute support staff as necessary within the limits of the annual appropriation resolution on behalf of this board, and to acknowledge acceptance of such offers on behalf of this board, subject to a subsequent vote of ratification by this board, provided, however, that upon ratification by this board, the employment shall be deemed effective as of the date and time of the employee's acceptance of the superintendent's offer. Nothing in this resolution shall require the Board of Education to employ or continue to employ an individual who has not provided a criminal records check satisfactory to the board or who has not satisfied any other prerequisite to employment created by law or board policy. Number 12, authorize the Director of Curriculum Instruction, Assistant Superintendent, Director of Special Services, and Director of Business Operations to approve professional day requests for professional and support employees for state meetings, workshops, and events in an amount not to exceed the limits in the annual appropriation, board policy, and negotiated contracts. 13, authorize members of the board to attend workshops, seminars, and meetings for professional development and to benefit the academic and financial status of the district. 14, recommend that in accordance with Section 3313.26 ORC, that the board waive the reading of meetings from previous meetings. That concludes the items that we have for your consideration under new business and board recommendations. At this time, I will turn it back over to Mr. Begley for item D, appointments to OSBA and city committees.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. The board has several different roles that need to be filled. These are typically ad hoc committees or committees that work beyond the auspice of these meetings. Legislative liaison, Mrs. Gundrum has handled that in the past. Are you interested in doing that again?
I am.
Thank you. If there's no one else that wants to fill that role, then Mrs. Gundrum. We'll do that again for 2025. Parks and Rec, that was Mr. Clark. It's a requirement that you live in the city to be on this board, which you do. Would you like to fill that role again?
I would love to. Yep.
Thank you. The Planning Commission, again, have to be a city resident. I don't think we have anyone on the board that can serve in that role. We have used Doug Robertson in the past, and we've spoken to Doug, and he's willing to do it again.
I have, yes, he's willing to serve.
Thank you. And then Student Achievement, Mrs. Birding Miller has done that in the past. Would you be interested to continue to do that?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Then a motion to accept the recommendations.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Clark and Mrs. Birding Miller. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I got a question on the Thursday, June 26th meeting. Is it possible to make it on the 19th, the week before? I moved my vacation around so I wouldn't miss a meeting, and you hit it.
Well, actually, the last meeting in June is typically at as late as we can possibly make it in June at the request of the treasurer.
Okay.
If you want, like, to go into more detail as to why why we usually do that.
Sure. So in case there's anything that comes up at the end that we would have to modify the appropriations so they are in lines with the law and our actual spending. So we try to get as close as we can to that final payroll and the final check run that we have in June so that we have the authorization to pay those bills and haven't run out, not of money, but out of appropriation room to do that.
Okay.
Because to my understanding, we're basically closing the books from the previous school year. So we try to have it as late in the month so we can close the books to prepare for the next school year.
Correct. June 30th is our fiscal year
Fiscal year
end.
end. Yep.
Mr. Napier, I appreciate your attendance and desire to attend that meeting as well, but it's certainly okay to miss a meeting along the way.
Okay.
Back to the motion. If no further discussion, Mrs. Lee, please call the roll.
Mrs. Gundrum,
Yes.
Mr. Napier,
Yes.
Mr. Bagley,
Yes,
Mrs. Birding Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
thank you.